So let's talk for a second about emotions. So emotions and feelings are not the same thing. They are connected. A lot of people use them interchangeably. But when we think about actually the textbook definition of an emotion is really the physiological sensation that's associated with a feeling. So if we think about sad or angry or nervous, and we hear this a lot in all kinds of different self-care therapy strategies when people ask, oh, so you're feeling angry, where is that in your body? Kind of what is the physical sensation that's associated with that? So if you're talking to a friend, maybe a young friend in a school, and they say, I'm angry, and then you start to ask, how do you know? What does that feel like in your body? My face gets red, my heart starts beating fast. That's getting to the emotion part of it. And the amazing thing about emotions is that they don't last that long. So research has shown over and over and over again that emotions, the actual physiological part of it, only lasts in our body for about 90 seconds. So here is the trick punchline. If we can tolerate through the 90 seconds, right, with that emotion and kind of stay with it and feel it and accept it, then a lot of times that's it. And so distress tolerance, part of it is getting to a place where we can recognize and just tolerate the emotion without all the other stuff that we do. And it's the other stuff we do to try to deal with the emotion that often creates the most problems. So we have an emotion, we don't like it, we don't think that we can tolerate it. And so we do all these other things that actually make the challenge worse. It makes it harder because we're piling all this stuff on top of it. And really, when we think about it, emotions are essential to being humans. If we go to the next slide, Christy. And when we think about emotions and kind of why are they essential to being human, then we can really think about this idea of emotion regulation and the amygdala hijack. Perfect. Thank you, Christy. And so thinking about the idea of emotions being like an avalanche. And really, even before that, this idea that emotions, more than anything, are information. They're signals. There's something that our body is doing to kind of give us information, to clue us in. And so at a really basic survival space, it's that gut feeling that you get that's hard to describe, but is telling your body, this is not safe. This is, kind of where our body is going, and their signals or cues. And when I think about emotions like that, like, okay, this is information that I want to be able to use in the best way possible, that totally shifts the way that I personally think about emotions and feelings, because now it's information I can use and not just something I have to get over or that I shouldn't be feeling. And so the trick with emotions is that they're a little bit like an avalanche, right? So you can see here, the idea is that the sooner that we can jump on and really address them at the beginning, when it's starting, then we can actually address it in a way that's healthy, that kind of helps us stick to that 90-second sort of time frame, rather than what often happens, which is either we don't address it, we ignore it, we pretend like it's not there, or we pile on this other stuff to try to get rid of it or avoid it, that just makes it worse and worse and worse. So if we go to the next part of this, Christy, there's this lovely kind of figure and this idea of kind of the amygdala hijack and kind of thinking about what our brain is doing when we have an emotion. So what happens when we have an emotion is that what's happening is that the amygdala, right, which is where the emotion happens in our brain, the amygdala is really, really close to the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is where our memories are. So what happens in our brain, we have a really strong emotion. We have that physiological sense in our body. Our brain tries to make sense of it because that's what we naturally do. And oftentimes, because it's so close to that hippocampus, these things get really, really complicated and all, kind of messed up together. And so then we have this physiological kind of thing, and then our brain goes to the hippocampus to try to figure out, what is this? What do I do? How do I respond? And then we're kind of going back into past experiences. This is where the trauma starts to connect. And so then this is where a lot of things start to get more complex. And this is why sometimes people talk about emotional regulation and this idea of the amygdala hijack, which is really that we have an emotion and then all of a sudden it, avalanches, it crescendos into this other thing. And then that's when the warning kind of signal starts to get hit. And so really the emotions at this point have kind of taken over and are now driving a lot of what we're doing, when in reality, what happened was an error in our brain, this cognitive error in terms of the connection between the emotion and then what's actually going on. So if we go on to the next slide there, and that's where that amygdala hijack is, that button, the emergency button. And then really back to this idea of radical acceptance. And this idea that experiencing peace, so if you think about someone who's really peaceful or really zen, you think of them as being really grounded, super calm. The reality is that it's not that these friends are not feeling any emotions, right? We all feel emotions all the time. It's part of being human. It just means that when we have these emotions, that we're capable of dealing with these emotions in a way that's not making things worse, but also is kind of in that space that Stephanie was showing, that we have the emotion, we can recognize it, and then we can put it on the leaf, and then it gently flows away, right? So in the midst of all these chaos, that we can manage the things that we can manage without letting our amygdala and our emotions kind of take over.